Imagine yourself under a starry sky, around the warm glow of a sacred fire, where speakers gather to share their wisdom and insights. Creating a sacred space where all are welcome to warm their hands, here are your hosts, Sarenth Odinsson, Snow, Cabra, and Emily Streaking Fate. Discuss spirituality, mythology, animism, and culture around a virtual sacred fire. Won't you join us around Grandfather Fire?
Thou who art I beyond all I am, who hast no nature and no name, who art when all but thou are gone, thou center and secret of the sun, thou hidden spring of all things known and unknown, thou aloof, alone, thou the true friar within the reed, brooding and breeding, source and seed of life, love, liberty, and light, thou beyond speech and beyond sight. Thee I invoke, my faint fresh fire, kindling as my intents aspire. Thee I invoke, abiding one, thee, center and secret of the sun, and that most holy mystery of which the vehicle am I. Appear most awful and most mild, as is lawful in thy child.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to Around Grandfather Fire. This is Season 6, Episode 122 with my good friends and co-hosts Cabra, Snow, and Emily Streaking Fate. How are you all doing tonight?
I am good. I am working on keeping warm. There's a lot of cold weather happening around the northern hemisphere.
Seems to be the trial of the moment, especially in places that are not used to ice and snow. Prayers and hopes go with all you people who are having to struggle with deep infrastructure not meant for cold weather.
Seeing a lot of people talk about frozen pipes.
Yep, if you can get the heat tape on now, there's no time like yesterday, but the better time is before the worst happens. All right, so snow went. How about you, Cabra?
I'm good. I live in a place that's very used to the amount of cold that we're getting, so I just pulled my snow gear out of the closet, and since the sun was out today, I went and worked on my wood pile in the back. I'm hoping to have firewood dried and ready by the time we start having people in our backyard for ritual in the spring. So that was just really good.
That's awesome. And how about you, Emily?
I am also good. I am also in a place that is used to the cold, although I do forget to turn on the heat in my room sometimes and then wonder why I am quite so cold. But I am enjoying the weather now. Is warm enough for a really nice walk in the woods with snow pants. And so that's been really nice the last few days.
Awesome. So what projects are folks working on since we're starting off this new season? And a lot of people are repeating the phrase, new year, new me. I'm not really following that. I'm more of a continuation of the projects that I was working on previous to the new year. I'm still working on that book. I'm still plugging away at. It's now 81,500 words. And that's before
For some reason, I thought you were going to say 81,000 pages. I was like, knowing how much you've been working on this, I wouldn't be surprised, but that's excessive even for you.
Let's not tempt the gods. I don't want to. It's almost 200 pages for standard format on my Google Doc. From what I gather, it's about double that when you print it, which scares the hell out of me. But
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I guess I'm in a sort of similar boat. I'm not really sort of starting anything new. I'm just kind of restarting things because I was really sick over the holidays. Like I got flu just before the solstice, and then it turned into a chest infection for New Year's. So apologies if my voice is a bit kind of croaky still. I'm on the tail end of that. So I'm just sort of trying to get going again, really, after all that.
how about you,
I
Emily?
am-
Okay, Cabra, sorry.
I am still working on my grimoire. Moving from the technical magic spirit conjuration half of it to the devotional half of it, which is fun because in ye old Catholic grimoires, you didn't have to include the devotional directions. You just assumed everybody had been through seminary already. So now I have to include a section in the book on how to do polytheism with Jesus and Satan. So that'll be fun. Um, it's slow, but it's coming along one day at a time.
That's really cool. It's always nice when the magic books just assume that you know already. Like you look through the Greek magical papyrus, and every now and then you'll just see, and then do the usual. It's like, well, that's good if you know what the usual is. It's not good if you're reading this 2,000 years after this was written and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, for my stuff, I would say there are some new things this year. There's a group that Diana Paxson is leading for meditation and trance work, and I'm doing that as kind of a refresher and a way to meet more people. There's also a group working with Winifred Rose Hodges' view of souls from a heathen perspective, and that's getting started. So I'm looking forward to that and expanding maybe how I view my own soul map. And this last weekend at Winter Troth Moot, I led an ancestor ritual. So I'm looking forward to maybe doing more of that type of thing this year.
Yeah, I was gonna say we should mention Trothmoot because the three heathens here all attended Trothmoot, which is kind of the virtual gathering of Troth members, and both Emily and Sarenth did workshops and talks and things. Sarenth did a lot of his Galdering, so there was a lot of throat singing, and as the weekend went on, I was just cutting out more and more and more.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'm happy they offer an online portion because the physical one that comes out in summer switches depending on what time zone we're doing that year. So last year it was Eastern, and this time it's Pacific, I think.
But otherwise, same old, same old. It switches the physical location in the summer, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but
So that people have to travel different distances depending, so that some years it's closer to some people.
Troth Moot for me was a really good time. The workshops I did were Encountering the Runes, Digging the Dvergar. The very first thing we did was the ritual to Othin and Bragi, and then Encountering the Runes, then the Digging the Dvergar, and then your Ancestor Workshop. Those were all a lot of fun. And I really dig how you do your Ancestor Workshop because mine is quite different. But that's one of the things I love about going to other people's stuff is that you get to see all the differences and you get to experience all the nuances of how their practice comes out.
Yeah, I know. Last episode when we were talking about things we wanted to get into, I think Emily, you'd mentioned sort of how ancestor focused your practices and wanted to sort of discuss and compare notes on that. So maybe that's a good point to kind of pivot into that discussion.
My ancestor practice started through my Kemetic practice. And once I set up a basic altar and started calling to my ancestors, very soon after that in the mail, I got a locket that had belonged to my great-grandmother and my grandmother. And so I took that as a sign that my ancestors were listening and very pleased with the work. And that was probably 8 years ago at this point, 7 or 8 years ago. And since then, it has just expanded. As my practice has expanded into heathenry, that has been a big aspect of it. My ancestors tend to be very loud. And if I am not listening, they will barge through friends, if possible. Or I've had readings done before where the person had to ask my ancestors to sit down and shut up for a while so they could actually do the reading. So I'm appreciative that my ancestors are loud, but I have had to learn boundaries and the fact that Not all ancestors are the same. Not all ancestors are ones that I want to listen to on certain topics. And it is very interesting how other people's ancestors are a part of my practice, such as Sarenth is one of my partners, and his ancestors are very involved in my ancestor practice at this point.
It's funny that I flash back to back before we became partners, and there were readings where I had to like get your ancestors to calm the hell down and actually form a line. Has anybody else, just as a random aside, has anybody else here ever experienced that where the ancestors like, oh my God, somebody's paying attention, or hey, we've been trying to get this message through. Now all of us talk at once.
I think that's one of those things where I think you've talked about it before, Sarenth, or written about it before, where it's like actually after generations of kind of Christians or atheists or whatever, or a mix, you're kind of the first spirit worker in the line. So all of a sudden you start talking to ancestors, whether named or sort of in a nebulous collective, and suddenly they're there going, oh, hey, someone's ringing. So they just kind of swarm and descend.
I am not super good at hearing dead people, actually. Except for like food offering requests. And that's kind of the thing, is that the only thing that'll happen is I'll walk past someone's ancestor altar in their house occasionally and be like, somebody wants I have a craving for meringue cookies. I don't like those. Right?
Right.
But that's it, is like, aside from learning that sometimes the weird food cravings are like my ancestors or somebody else's ancestors being like, can somebody get some pierogies around here? Like, come on. That's pretty much the only noise that I really get. I also like my grandma on my dad's side, the dead grandmother as opposed to the living one, is really good at keeping the rest of the family back because she is very bullheaded. So that also kind of cuts down on the noise a little bit, is like, if you want to get to me, you have to get through like Amelia Barreta da Souza, right? Like Barreto da Souza. It's like a whole, it's not easy.
Sorry. That's amazing. Please go ahead. I'm sorry, Emily.
That's so helpful though, to have like strong ancestors that will help keep the others in line and help maintain some order is super, super helpful. That's one of the things I've been thankful about my ancestor lines. There is definitely a lot of healing to be done, as with everybody's ancestor lines. But I am thankful that I have some strong ancestors that are able to keep things generally in line. My ancestors are very big about wanting to help me out as much as they can. And I have found that they really want me to ask for what I need. So I try to be better at making it a balanced, okay, I am giving you these offerings. I am telling you about my day. I am talking to you. But when something more significant comes up that I might need help with, I'm trying to be better about remembering, hey, my ancestors would love to throw some of the family luck, or however you describe it, some of the energy towards helping me get done what I need to get done. And I don't always decipher, I think, their messages clearly. Sometimes it takes a 2x4, and sometimes it does take having spirit worker friends who are kind enough to pass the message along when I'm not listening. But I know my ancestors knocked down my door because there is no one else in the family currently. But I appreciate knowing that I have at least a portion of my family that like supports me and is behind me. And it is very interesting looking back at different eras of ancestors and different aspects of the ancestor line. This year, I will be working a lot with older ancestors. My ancestors want me to work with ancestors at the mound, ancestors in the kitchen, and like Ulfhafn and Berserker ancestors. So those are the three big areas of ancestors work that I will be hopefully turning some of my energy to this year.
That's really cool. I was going to ask, how do you manage sort of those older ancestors? Because you see a lot of people, they sort of hear about ancestor veneration and sort of the ancestral parts of these things, and then suddenly they're on ancestry.com, sort of trying to chase their family tree. And at a certain point, it just kind of becomes pure guesswork, or it gets very sort of vague and nebulous. So I was just kind of wondering if you had thoughts about how you navigate that with talking about interacting with those older ancestors.
Genealogy is something that I have not turned enough time to. I know I have some of my relatives that have, and I've tried to get a hold of that work, and I would like to still get a hold of that. I'm not the best with names. And so for me, it's more of I feel the energies, or like with the older ancestors, I can tell obviously when it's an Ulfhafnen or a Berserker ancestor coming through, or the much more recent ancestors that maybe I knew when they were alive. I can tell them specifically sometimes. But in general, it's a bit more amorphous for me. But I do think that it is helpful, useful, and enlivening to them when you do know their names. And so I do try to repeat names of at least my more recent ancestors that I want to honor. I do that usually in a monthly comedic ritual. But genealogy is on one of my long to-do lists of I would like to get more names, but I have not gone down that path much yet.
Really
No,
quick.
I've
Go ahead, Snow.
I was just going to say, I know whenever I've done sort of genealogy, family tree stuff, I always find it a lot easier to go horizontally than vertically. It's a lot easier to be like, oh, we've got cousins of cousins of cousins of cousins than like great, 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 great granddad or whatever. Because I mean, especially, I mean, when you've got Irish heritage, you get to a point where it's like, well, between the British being there and the Irish Civil War, there's a lot of burnt records that we don't have and have lost. So we have farmers, and before them was probably more farmers, and someone was probably called Patrick or Sean. And uh, so I know for myself, it's kind of people that I knew personally, relatives I knew personally, like my maternal grandparents or things like that. And then after that, it really just becomes a kind of vague, nebulous collective for me.
I'm in a weird spot where if I was in Brazil, I could roll up to the Catholic Church where my grandparents had gotten baptized and been like, this person born this year, probably baptized around 6 months old. This is the name of their parents. Do you have their baptismal record? Snap a picture of it and then be like, do you know where the parents were baptized? And then the Catholic Church has kept these records up and back and up and back. The problem is that when you go on the websites and they're like, we have so many baptismal records, and you're like, okay, let's see if you can tell when my still living grandmother was baptized. This is her full legal name. Like, this is when she was born. This is roughly when she was baptized. And it's like, did you mean Sebastian? And I'm like, Sebastiana da Souza? No, that's the other grandmother's last name. Come on now. So it's really interesting because at some point I may end up going and running up to a priest at some point and being like, hello, what is this thing? And he's probably going to be like, why is this American asking me about a baptismal record? But for me, one of the things I do to deal with the difficulty of genealogy is to think about it as more of a cultural thing. I know I got really lucky that I have a lot of recipes from my family. And so I can, by doing a little bit of culinary history, come to understand like this dish that we grew up eating comes from XYZ place. This music that we grew up listening, it ties us to XYZ place, and on back into, in some cases, even Portugal, right? So that's more generalized knowledge like that of the culture and history, I think, is at some point just like what you have to go on,
I'm glad you put it that way, because a lot of folks will hit up ancestry.com or 23andMe send their spit in, and then get some results back, and they'll go, "Oh, I'm Irish now." It's like, no, no, dog, you're still American. You are still very much, if you were born and raised here, you're still American. You don't get to shed the Americanness because you found some interesting genealogy. Like, and the problem, of course, is like when I first sent my results in, I got back, you're 3% Ashkenazi Jew, and I'm like, neat. How do you tell that? That's a culture. And this is the problem with DNA testing, like as it's popularized right now. You can look. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm plus 3% on a DNA test. That's a teaspoon of salt in a swimming pool.
Right. And so, like, do I have that ancestral connection? I don't know. Because the DNA tests are giving me vague snapshots of people that may have migrated in and out of that area based on what their databases have. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying to find your ancestors, with trying to look at your ancestry, but looking at your DNA results as though you're connected with the culture is something that I'm seeing come up more and more in heathen circles. And I think that one of the things I took out of your explanation, Cabra, that I was like, oh, thank gods. Because like you said, looking at the more general milieu of where your food comes from, how it got there, is going to tell you probably more about like what your, at least your last couple of generations immediate background was compared to like, I mean, if your family's chucking stuff out like, oh, then this is how you make a sous vide, and this is how you make a bechamel, your average middle class, lower class family is not going to know what the hell that is. But if you're talking about French cuisine that was brought over and started, say, a generation or two ago, and maybe they started watching Julia Child, and you can trace that, that's one thing. But it's a whole nother thing if you're like, yeah, so we were doing these kinds of really fancy dinners back when, my great-great-grandfather was around. Well, then they probably weren't peasants. And you can at least start with something there. That I love that you put that puzzle piece forward for people, because I think that is a really big puzzle piece that a lot of people miss.
Just to kind of go on a tangent off of that slightly, there's a really, really cool podcast called Taringa, which comes from New Zealand, and it's a Maori English thing. So the people doing it are Maori, and they sort of do the podcast bilingually. But when they were starting off, they were really talking about the culture and telling sort of Maori myths and Maori folk tales and stories and things, which was really, really cool, and talking about the different tribes across the islands. And I remember there was an episode where sort of the main host was talking about how on one side of his family, he had an Irish grandparent, but as far as he was concerned, he wasn't interacting with Irish culture. He'd never lived in Ireland. He'd never had a job in Ireland. He wasn't raised in Ireland. So it would feel dishonest to say that he was Irish. But then he started going on business trips regularly to Ireland and making friends in Ireland. And then he's interacting with Irish culture. And then he mentions that. And then they turn around and go, well, to us, you're one of us, because now you're turning up and interacting with us and getting involved. You're not walking around as the loudmouth tourist declaring you're one of us when you've just landed. And I always think that's a really kind of helpful way of thinking about it. It's sort of those relationships.
I do have a question. How do other people interact with non-family of origin ancestors, right? Like, I know a lot of people talk about family of origin ancestors, like your genetic heritage, adoptions, marriages, those sorts of things. But I know for me, talking about queer ancestors was how I started doing ancestor work in the first place. And that gave me the healing that I needed to even think about talking to like my genetic lineage. And what's more important in my practice, though, don't get me wrong, grandma is going to get her coffee, right?
Always.
Is my sorceress lineage. Like, to me, what's more useful in my practice is not having a sociologist lady who was really good at making cookies behind me in ritual. It's being able to call up the ghost of Aleister Crowley and being like, so I was thinking about summoning this spirit. What do you think? And then him doing his like meatball head baldy routine of like, oh, how the turns have tabled. Suddenly you're asking me for my opinion. What's next? Basic respect? It's like, Uncle Al, just tell me if the darn triangle goes in the southeast or the southwest, man.
So if you have trouble with Uncle Al, why don't you just, it's kind of like the saintly thing, when you bury your saint's head upside down, you just threaten to kick him down the stairs again. Oh no, I
I'm
think
going to tell some people in the OTO you said that. They're going to die laughing. That's so good.
you're welcome.
A deep cut.
But to do it properly in a ritualistic family, you have to, in a ritualistic way, you need to scream "yay" first.
I mean, I think first you have to take the statue you have of Crowley and put him in a room with a spotlight and a bouncer, and then
Yes.
you walk in and drag him out by the collar and pop him down the stairs.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm definitely going to suggest this one to my OTO buddies. They're going to get a kick out of that. But yeah, so like non-family of origin ancestral lineages in your practice. Do other people do that?
Yeah, when I do a general ancestor ritual, I usually list the ancestors as ancestors of spirit, ancestors of blood and bone, and ancestors of lineage. And so I try to incorporate everybody. But when I am more so what I would say working with the ancestors, then usually it ends up being a group that's more specific to what I'm doing. Sarenth and I have an outdoor shrine for our spirit worker ancestors. And some of these are blood related, some of these are lineage related. And I think sometimes that I won't say that one type is more important than the other, because they all have an interest in you moving forward. But I do think honoring your ancestors can encompass so much more than just your blood ancestors. And I think people might find it more useful to focus on non-blood ancestors sometimes. I usually try to do a personal ritual for the Trans Day of Remembrance every year, because queer ancestors is very important to me. I will work with my spirit worker ancestors for a lot of things specifically. I do work with my blood ancestors on some things because they are very loud and they are willing to come forward and work with things. And some of that is more mundane stuff, and some of that is more specific. I do think there is the potential for more non-human ancestors as well. And so there are some parts of my practice where I work with non-human ancestors. So usually I try to honor everybody when it's a general thing. But if I'm doing more work-related stuff, then it is a more specific group that I am calling and asking. And I definitely try not to ask an ancestor that has no idea about something, because dead people are dead people, and they're not suddenly all-knowing, all omniscient, perfect beings, which also took me a while to realize, like, boundaries are a good thing. Just like with your living family, sometimes you need to tell your dead family to go away. I do know that there have been stories about former leaders of lodges and such that have passed away but still hang around. And people have had to ask them to go or send them away. So, but yeah, I think ancestors want you to succeed in general. And so knowing if you're asking your ancestors for help, asking the ancestors that have the ability to help you with that thing.
I always find ancestors is one of those categories where I've always found myself feeling that I have to be careful about terminology. And so just for myself, I don't say blood ancestors, I'll say familial ancestors, because then if there's people marrying in, if there's adoption, anything like that, then there isn't a genetic lineage, but it's still family. And I mean, especially if you're looking at historical cultures, that kind of thing happens the world over, where, you know, if you're with the program and helping us when we need help and you're around to, you know, stir the tea or whatever, then you're one of us regardless. Um, and the way that I typically split it is just familial ancestors and chosen ancestors. And I pretty much treat chosen ancestors the same way that people treat heroes, when people have sort of hero cults and things. And
Really
so for
quick,
me,
you were going to want to define that for this audience because I know what you're talking about. Your general audience may not.
that's all right. Um, so familial ancestors, for me, that's specifically naming the one that I knew. And then beyond that, it's kind of, you know, the inherited ancestors without whom I wouldn't be here, who I am, where I am, how I am, whether they were good, ill, or neutral in life. They sort of, you know, without them, I am the product of them. Um, and then chosen ancestors are the inspirational figures, figures to do with place, to do with craft, to do with profession, to do with trade or hobbies. Um, and I mean, that's pretty much what hero cult was historically. So when people talk about heroes in the Greek myths or the Norse sagas or whatever, it's basically here are these inspirational figures that did these amazing things that potentially fall into myth and legend, and seem like miracles, or maybe they sort of become deified or treated sort of like, you know, demigods or what have you. Um, and so for me, that's a lot of sort of musicians and composers who've passed, being someone who works in music. Um, but then that's also kind of similar to how I view saints as a polytheist and not a Christian at all. They sort of fit into that category. So I'm sort of looking and going, well, here's an inspirational figure who did all these wonderful things, helped all of these people. They sort of set an example here and lived this exemplary life. And so they kind of fit into that category for me as well.
So for me, I follow a very similar thing to what both Snow and Emily have talked about. I worship and work with ancestors of blood and bone, spirit, adoption, lineage, and initiation. And a good chunk of these ancestors are not physically related to me at all, and not all of them are human. And I think that non-human aspect is something that sometimes gets lost and at other times gets overemphasized because the human is important, but it's not the only thing. So with regard to, say, my work as a Saith mother, which is somebody that is a person that does Saith. The Saith mother is somebody that does work with spirits, does spiritual work with spirits to effect an end. It's magic with spirits. The lineage of that, if you go back far enough, goes to Freya. It also goes to Othin. A lot of people will sidestep Othin, but he is one of the exemplary students of Freya's. And sometimes the ancestors have levied challenges based upon how I conduct myself, other times how I'm not conducting myself, sometimes based on a lot of times like the things that I get from the ancestors, both human and non-human, besides support, when it comes to doing active spiritual work of some kind, it's does this get the job done? The accoutrement of the vulva in Eric Sagaraltha is not something that I can get, at least not easily. And generally speaking, I'd have to get vintage fur to make it happen because one of the things that the vulva is said to have is cat skin gloves. I'm not skinning anyone's cats. That's just not happening.
The number of cats that died from magicians in history.
Honestly, yeah, kind of. Now, does that mean that, I'm going to be forever bereft of some kind of fur gloves? No, but it also doesn't mean that those are necessarily a required thing because we have indoor HVAC units. It may not be relevant to the practice of Sather as such because we're not walking around the fecking tundra. So sometimes my ancestors are kind of like, this was really useful and neat, and it was a culture marker, and it's not something you really need anymore. And sometimes they're like, no, you need that thing, and you'll figure it out when you get it. So sometimes the ancestors can be kind of cagey about why they want what they want until I experience a thing. And a thing can be a peak spiritual experience or something I do for a client. It can be, hey, here's this piece of spiritual technology that we weren't sure anybody was ever going to pick up ever again. Here you go. Good luck. You know, and sometimes it can be something as silly, simple as I picked up this really small string of semi-precious glass and strung it around my neck. And that is just queer enough in this culture to set me off from other people. You know, things like that. Because we have such heavily defined gender markers in this society, sometimes it doesn't take a lot for me to how do I put this? Be in alignment with the queer ancestors, if that makes sense.
I think this actually brings us really neatly into another question. And secretly, I've been working on Maleck's question about talking about each of our practice, cosmology, pantheon, and quotes approach, etc. What is your most common tool, and what is your fanciest tool? Right. I'll answer my own question first, just to give an example of what I mean. My most commonly used tool is my incense burner. And I actually burned incense right now. I have it on a triangle that I have like carved things, wood burned things into, right? As like a seat for spirit to come and be present. And I think my fanciest tool is probably I have a ritual sword. I actually got one. I never thought I was going to be the Jagoff with a ritual sword, but it is like right over there on the wall behind me while I'm recording. If you can see that red horizontal thing.
It's fucking pretty.
I know. I think you saw it IRL when you were at my wedding.
I did.
I'm getting it tattooed on myself so that I can invoke it when I can actually carry a sword into places.
Yes.
So what level Thelemite does that make you now?
I am only level 2.
Oh, well, that's okay. You got access to all the good cantrips.
No, we're saving the D&D question for later.
Oh, damn, you're right. So, Snow, Emily, you want to tackle this question?
All right. My most used tool is probably my candle holders. I will say the one that I use for my tea light is probably my most used one at this point, but I have plain black ones that I use for my bigger candles for magic workings, and I've been doing a lot more of those lately. And so they are getting a lot more use these days. But I would say my candle holders are my most used. My flashiest one is probably my iron staff that I purchased last year. It is.
Show us.
I have to get up and show you.
Oh, that's true.
But I can if you go ahead and Snow if you want to talk, and then I'll.
Sure, I can talk. I suppose similarly, my kind of most used one's probably my candle holder. I have a concrete candle holder that looks like a snake coiled up. I think there are a few photos of it floating around the Discord server as well. Because in my practice, the house spirit takes the form of a snake and appears as a snake. And if I'm doing anything magical or esoteric or spirit worky with the house spirit, often sort of I will draw snake sigils or something like that to connect with it. And then my fanciest is probably, that's a toss between the gothic runes that I had made or the crystal ball I have for scrying. It's probably a toss-up between those as Sarenth starts getting out wolf skins.
This is my iron staff in case. It's a little tall. It was made in the Ukraine, and it has been very useful in the short time that I've had it. Freya interrupted a coffee date to let me know that I needed to get one. So that is what I got, and it's very flashy. It was definitely an investment. It was definitely well worth it. And I'm looking forward to using that much more this year. Go ahead, Sarenth. Show all your flash.
So I think it's kind of a toss-up between the ones that I use the most often, which are the iron runes. These are made from a graveyard fence gate, which used to be a fort, which was a Native American fort at one point. So these are very, very old iron gate runes, and yeah, they connect with a lot of different fates here very, very well. They are perhaps one of my most used, but it's kind of a toss-up between the iron runes and the wolf skin that I have, which gets used the most often in ritual, because this guy pretty much accompanies me everywhere. Ever since I got him. I don't think there's been a ritual he hasn't been involved with for the last 8-10 years. And likewise, there's very few occasions where I don't bring my runes along, so it's kind of a toss-up for me. This is probably my flashiest and most expensive item, and it also is an ancestral item. It's a lot of things. And for me, I will go out of my way to say, you don't need expensive, flashy tools, but there's nothing wrong with them either, because we are tool users in this flesh, body, and history of our form. We use tools, and that is a good and useful thing.
It's one of those, if you can and want to, by all means do, but don't feel that you have to, or that you should, or that if you can't, you're somehow lesser.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
My spirits are ever so slightly different about that, especially the angels. The thing that they always tell me is, we expect your best. If your best legitimately is a butter knife out of your kitchen that you have just decided you're going to consecrate and never use for anything except ritual again, then that's your best. But if you have the money for a ritual knife and you show up with a butter knife, we're not talking to you. And it's like, well, that's fair.
No, I will say that at least some of my spirits take that tack as well. And that kind of, because I don't work with the angels as tightly anymore, that's certain spirits that are like, you can afford the thing, go get the damn thing. And I think that's a matter also of relationship too, because you have these relationships where the angels can pull on you like that, and that's the expectation. And that's worth pointing out when you're getting into certain relationships with spirits, that some of the spirits are going to be like, you give me the absolute best, or it's just not going to happen. I think that's deeply important, whether we're talking about ancestors or otherwise.
I mean, that also works with offerings and sacrifice.
Yep.
Like if you start looking at most of the sort of extant sort of ancient advice on ritual and offering and sacrifice, especially if you're looking at the Hellenistic stuff or the Roman stuff, over and over again, you'll see offer within your means, which makes it all very relative. So again, if all you can offer is some water that's come out the tap, then that's within your means. But if you could offer, an entire 3-course meal or whatever, and that not completely put you out of pocket, then your means of, it changes. It's relative.
Yeah.
Note, do not give my grandmother ideas.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, oh gosh, we're gonna have to have a big ancestor meal now. Thanks,
oh
no.
Man. When the co-hosts give each other homework, there's that AGF bus. Beep beep.
Oh, I'm finally going to have to make moqueca. I've been putting it off for like 2 or 3 years now, and now I'm finally going to just have to bite the bullet and do it. So that'll be fun. Sorry, that's a Brazilian fish stew that includes bell peppers, onions, tomato slices sometimes, but it also includes dende oil, which is something that is like very very important to the cuisine where I was born, by way of West Africa, because Brazil is a very black country, and
Yeah.
I mean that as a morally neutral descriptor,
Right.
or a value neutral descriptor, but it is a very black country. We have a lot of West African food influences, but I think it's finally time to uncork the dende oil and learn the hard way how much is the appropriate amount, because apparently if you have too much of it, your stomach will let you know after.
Oh.
I'm probably going to start with like a tablespoon on top, just for like a little flavor.
Oh, okay. So it's not a cooking oil. It's a you add this for flavor thing.
Well, it depends
Oh,
on the dish, right?
okay.
If you're making muqueca, it's just a little bit on the top as a flavor.
Mhm.
If you are making acarajé, which is like deep fried bean fritters, those are deep fried in dende oil. I don't have enough. I can't afford enough to deep fry a black bean fritter in it, but I definitely have more than enough to make like several fish stews. So, why did we go on this tangent about my grandmother wanting me to make fish stew?
Sometimes the ancestors have requirements, and sometimes certain spirits will want you to do the expensive, important thing.
And I also have one like Mother Mary is kind of the opposite. She turns to me a lot and catches me overthinking about like which oil lamp do I get, et cetera, et cetera. She'd be like, stop it, stop it, stop it. Just pray. That's always what she comes back to me with. Is I'm like, I don't know which rosary to grab. She's like, whichever one is closest. Just pray it already.
You know, it's funny. Sometimes Othin can be that way, where it's very utilitarian, and sometimes he's like, no, the way you do this ritual is going to matter. I find it very interesting at times where I find for a lot of stuff that I do for other people, he tends to be more the way you do this is going to matter. But when it comes to stuff for myself, he's much more just do the fucking thing. But I think part of that is because he's having to fight with my ADHD somewhat. Because if I put it off long enough, I'll forget that I have to do a thing. And he knows this. But there are times like where I'm like, oh, well, I've already done my cleansing for the day. I'm good. I can do this reading. And my Runeteer specifically is like, no, 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 no. Do the fucking protocol. This actually, funny enough, came up during Troth Moot when somebody asked me for a last minute runic healing. And I said, I don't know. And the Runeteer was like slapped his hand down, proverbially speaking, and went, fucking do it. And I went, okay. And he's like, oh, no, 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 no. Don't half-ass this. You're doing all your protocols in front of God and country. Oh, okay. Sure. Sometimes the performance of ritual isn't for us, it's for them. By them, I mean, of course, the Ginreg and the gods, the ancestors, and the Vatir, but sometimes it's for the people. Like, I think to a certain degree, we downplay the theatricality of ritual to our own detriment, because if the ritual isn't actually involving, even if it's a brief one, if you're not bringing people in with you and they're sitting on the outside as opposed to participating, that actually gets in, at least in my experience, can get in the way of shit getting done. Sorry, I just took a really fucking left turn at performance. Performance has been like a thing for me tonight.
I mean, maybe that will be the next aspect of practice that we talk about is like, when do you, I mean, how much does performance play a role, right? And so, as a person who also does a lot of community rituals, because it's community, oh God, community devotional work is part of the building up of relationships that must happen in grimoires before you are able to do your individual work, full stop. They expect you to be going to mass. Like, they expect you to be going to mass. But in my case, it's less going to mass and more like, did you actually do a winter solstice ritual with your communities? Right. And so I know for myself, because a lot of my stuff is very much tied into bridal veil mysticism, like the bells and whistles matter. Like my spirits love the incense, music, mood lighting, all of that is like really important. And because I'm surrounded by Thelemites and my spouse, who's also like also the person I wind up organizing a bunch of stuff with, is like super artsy. And I mean that as a compliment. We always end up going too far, if that's possible. I think that's also maybe
Ceremonialist going too far? Perish the thought.
You didn't see my winter solstice ritual. It was drama.
You should. Oh man, I really wish you had been with us for the Year of Aun ritual we did at Yule last year. I get it, because we had a bread Aun, and we ripped his ass apart and threw him in the fire. And the thing that sticks with me is my apprentice, Matt, just had to rip his dick off and throw it in the fire. It just fucking sticks with me.
John Barleycorn must die. Truly.
Ding, ding.
What about you, Snow and Emily? Where does performance come into play for your practices?
I mean, I suppose I'm more towards the opposite end of that than you are. The ceremonial Thelemite. I'm sure to everybody's shock and surprise. I mean, for me, a lot of it is doing what I can, when I can, how I can, and that being understood. For me, I find the gods that I give worship to, the spirits that I work with, the ancestors that I venerate, a lot of it is understanding the context, understanding the moment, and a lot of it is based on sincerity and love and respect and devotion. And then everything after that is kind of extra. So long as I'm turning up, I'm meaning what I'm saying, and I'm giving something, then everything else is kind of the bells and whistles on top of that. I suppose the times where I get the most ceremonial is if I'm doing something that is decidedly more esoteric than just sort of my standard ritual, where I might get into astrological timings. I'll get my head covering on. I might do some divination beforehand, or I might do some divination afterwards. Might go into a trance state. There might be chanting involved, or singing, or something like that. And then it gets a bit more sort of complicated. There's often some degree of planning there. But then that's kind of contrasted with my more kind of regular routine ritual and worship, which is a lot more kind of doing something rather than doing nothing kind of mentality. What about you, Emily?
Well, I grew up Catholic, and I love, love, love ritual. When I lived in Nebraska, I was a member of AGF and a student in a Wiccan coven. And so I would participate in their group rituals in addition to doing my own stuff. When I lived in Oklahoma, I would participate with a local OBOD group. Now that I am up in Michigan, if I have the opportunity to participate in a group ritual, I do, because I love all the bells and whistles. But with my own personal rituals, I will sometimes trip myself up if I try to overplan it. With my comedic stuff, I try to have a certain level of formality, but even then I will trip myself up sometimes. And so I have to remember the important thing is to do the celebration or do the connection, whatever the point of the ritual is the main thing. And then if I can throw extra flourishes around it, I will. With my own personal rituals, I like to include candles and incense and offerings, and sometimes different necklaces or dressing up. But I don't usually pre-write a lot of stuff. Unless it is a specific ritual that gets done over and over and over, and there's a script to it. A lot of times the prayers and such that are included in the ritual will be stuff that I lean into in the moment, and it's a little bit more spirit-led in that sense. Also, because there is a 2-year-old puppy in the house, my sistrum gets used a lot less because bells and such make him bark. So learning how to do rituals in different ways, so that I can celebrate and let loose, but also not set off the dog and the small child, is an interesting challenge sometimes. But personally, I love dramatics when it can be included, and I really enjoy the community feel of celebrating with other people. As much as I love having my own personal practice, I do enjoy being able to also go out in the community when I have that opportunity.
I think that was one thing that was really nice about doing Trothmoot, is that a lot of people who normally practice as solitary heathens can sort of connect in this way to do ritual together, and sort of doing it over Zoom or whatever. Because I know lots of groups were kind of adapting to do that kind of thing during the lockdowns for the COVID pandemic. And so there's kind of thinking of other ways of doing it. And so doing that, it kind of bridges that gap between being a solitary practitioner, which on the one hand, you've got all the freedom you want. You're not trying to deal with scheduling. You're not compromising on what you want to do because you're dealing with other people. But it could also be quite lonely. You might feel like you're lacking support, whatever. And then on the other hand, sort of, all the sort of group dynamics and things. And it kind of bridges that as kind of this in-between thing rather than it being that binary, which I thought was really cool. I think it could be really cool moving forward if we see more organizations doing that kind of thing, sort of having sort of the physical meetups with a virtual option, or maybe alternating. Here's the physical one, and then next time we're doing it virtually, and that kind of thing. It was just a thought I had while you were talking there.
So for me, performance is a pretty big aspect of ritual, whether it's for other people or for myself. I'm performing Galder of some kind or another pretty much every time that I do any kind of ritual now. What will take me out of a ritual most often is if the performers aren't feeling it. And I don't mean like reading off of a sheet. You can feel things from spirit and still read off of a sheet, because my first 16, 18 years of life were in the Catholic Church, and those priests meant every word when they would do the liturgy. That's not the question. The question is, are you just saying stuff, or are you being moved by it when you're expressing it? Because some of my priests couldn't carry a tune in a bucket with help. Others could and had beautiful singing voices, and I will admit sometimes that enhanced the experience. But I never got the feeling that they were just reading stuff to read stuff. And that is something that I have found in some pagan rituals, which deeply bothers me and will immediately bring me out, is if you're reading somebody else's script and you don't believe what you're reading on the page. And I have no idea how to impart that in an audio format like this, or even really explain it, even if I had more than a couple of sentences to write, because it's something you're either vibing with the material or you're not, and it just comes through in how you conduct yourself.
I mean, what I'm hearing is, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Go for it. Go for it.
It sounds like
Please.
it's karaoke rules, right? When you go to see like a Broadway style musical performance at Ye Local Theater, you are that kind of bougie, which I am. Then you expect everybody to hit the notes and to sell you on the performance. When
Right.
you go to karaoke, I would rather listen to the dude who is drunk off his behind, but is singing a song that has been his favorite song since he was 16, and you have to understand how cool this AC/DC song is. No, really, have you ever actually slowed down and listened to this song? I would rather listen to that dude for 3 songs in a row, even if he plays the same AC/DC song the same time and misses all the notes, than to listen to one person who's got a decent singing voice, but the only feeling you're getting off of them is that they just like the attention, or that or they're like so worried about, they're so feeling awkward, not having a good time, that even though they might hit all of the notes, it like the performance falls flat. So I think what I'm hearing is it's karaoke rules.
Yeah, because there's nothing wrong with reading off the script at all. It's are you feeling it? Because like you said, it's the difference between somebody like I would rather somebody erroneously belt out half the notes of a song and do it with gusto than sing well but do it half-assed. Because what I'm seeking is connection, and I can't connect with you if you're holding that piece of connection back. And I think
it's
that for me is a really important aspect of community ritual is that I'm not just here to connect with them. I'm also here to connect with you. Sorry, go ahead, Snow.
I was going to say, it sounds like half of it is make sure you're saying something and not just talking. And then the other half of it is having that sort of passion and sincerity in what's happening. I'm sort of thinking about sort of a running off sort of musical analogies. Um, a conversation I've often had with friends is about the song Hallelujah. Like Leonard Cohen wrote that, and you know he means every single word of it. But his
Yes.
vocal range is 3 notes on a good day. But you watch any singing competition show on TV, and they squeeze 18 other notes in there to try and show off their vocal range. But you know that they don't stop to think about what any of the words mean at any point in their rehearsals. And that sort of feels like what you're talking about here.
Controversial fucking opinion. I can't stand the Pentatonics version of Hallelujah for that reason.
Great.
Because you all sing fucking pretty. We get it. You're shiny.
Mm-hmm.
Sing something else. This is not your song. And it's also not a fucking Christmas song.
Mm.
You know who could probably do a really great cover of Hallelujah is Tom Waits. If he hasn't already.
Ooh.
I also like, Sarenth, that you said it's okay to read off a script, because I do think that there is a certain, some people will look down upon ritual participants who are reading off the script. But I think it's very much about, do you have the heart behind it, not have you memorized the lines? Because everybody does things differently. And when you're involving a bunch of people to participate in a ritual, it's easier if there's a script. But yeah, I like Cabra's definition of karaoke rules. And there is nothing wrong with having the words in front of you if you have the heart behind it. Because you can still move the people. You can still call to the spirits. Having like words written ahead of time in front of you does not impact that at all if you have the emotion and the will behind it.
I mean, I will sort of freely and openly tell people like 98, 99% of my prayers I have written down. And I will stand there at my shrine and read off my phone or read off my iPad or whatever, because it's all in notes. Whether they're ones that I've written through doing research, very much written them intellectually, or whether they're ones that I've written being directed by who I'm writing them for, or whether I've seen a really cool one and copy and pasted it with permission to use it. It is there. But I feel myself, in myself, and from how the ritual goes after the fact, whether I was reading it through because here's my script and we got to get this done, versus I'm reading this and I'm feeling it and something is happening here. And the contrast in how you feel internally and the whole vibe and atmosphere of the ritual is entirely different.
I think this is where we get to, is it a good offering, right? And it's what do you bring, like something that we touched on earlier with regard to actually like laying down physical offerings. Is this a good offering? Is this your best? And it's not a measure of whether or not you wrote the prayer. Is this something you are actually invested in? Is this something that is actually a gift? I think for me, that's what makes the difference between a good ritual versus one that falls flat. Is the ritual itself, if it's an offering ritual, if it's a working ritual, there's other criteria, but if it's a devotional ritual, are you feeling the words? Even if you're like, I have been like, I was in the hospital with DKA, for instance, and I had a small shrine for healing and connection with my God set up, and I could barely form words at various points because of how fucked I was. And the ritual that I did in that space and that people helped me with had such meaning for me, even though I could barely form words because of pain. And so I don't think you need to be the most eloquent you've ever been. You just need to put your heart in it. That for me is like, I guess where I'm getting at with performance and connection and everything else. Like, are you in it or you're not? And if you're not, I think that's actually okay. whether it's devotional ritual or other form, like if you're having a time in your life where you're like, I'm just going through the motions, it's fully acceptable to do devotional work and prayer and things like that without having to always be 100% invested, because you might not have the mental wherewithal to do it that day. Maybe you're having a low spoons day. So at the same time that I'm calling for people to like be involved, I'm also like, be gentle with yourselves, because life happens.
Well, and your best is not going to be at the same level every time or at every point every day. Your best one
Exactly.
day might just be like reading through it and thinking about it, and your best another day might be much more intonation and gesturing and whatnot. I also just wanted to echo, like Snow, I use the notes app on my phone for different pairs that I can pull up easily in the moment. I find it super useful for that.
I have never run into the issue of not having written prayers or having that be seen as lesser, because having a prayer book, right, your own Enchiridion, if we want to use the jargony term for it, is like very much a part of the practice. So I have this guy that I use mostly for like my Thelemic Solar ones, and then I have my like general purpose one that's still upstairs. It's got my rosary prayers in it, the collects from the mass in it. It's got a bunch of songs and hymns in there. It's got like some pop songs that I end up singing like hymns. Like there's a song
Nice.
from Disney's Bambi in there because it feels moving. But I know that like on my low spoons days when I am doing my daily prayer, like I look over at my ancestors and I hand them their coffee and I'm just like, and they're like, yeah, gonna be like that. You didn't sleep until 3 a.m., did you, kid? And I'm like, here, coffee.
I am monosyllabic.
Right. And then sometimes like my prayer to Mother Mary is not the whole, salve Rainha Mãe de Misericórdia, right? Vida, doçura, esperança, nossa salve. No, instead it's like, I regret my life. Like I will literally just like lay down on the floor next to her altar and be like, I repent. I did this to myself and I'm sorry. Because that's where I'm at on that day. It's like, should you have had espresso at 10 p.m. at night on a Tuesday? No, but you did. And so I just go and I'm like, I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Yes, I will.
Yes, you will.
But I feel like this is a good time to switch to one last question.
Yes.
And maybe wrap up. Claire asks, if you had unlimited free time, what major project would you like to be able to work on? I'm gonna let someone else answer that one first. I've been thinking about it all afternoon.
I got you. I know exactly what I'd do. I'd make a fucking Hoff. I'd make a heathen sacred space where folks could come, and a big enough sacred space. If I had unlimited time to work on it and unlimited resources, oh, you bet your ass it'd be like a full thing where you could come, stay a week, and do ritual, and just like an incubation chamber for heathens. Maybe expand from there and make a bunch of like incubation chambers, plural. Because I think for me, one of the really cool things that I've run into has been people who make those for like cons. I counted my first one back in 13 or 12. I think it was 13 when the first Many Gods West was on. And of course, I'm trying to recall this and I can't remember their fucking name. They were a Scathi devotee. They're a friend of mine. Fuck's sakes.
Back in 1312.
Hold on, back up. Incubator, like the thing you put chicken eggs in?
No, okay. Let me back up a minute. I mean, technically, if you're part of a chicken cult, maybe that would work for you, but no.
I mean, I'm still stuck on back when Sarenth was in 1312. I didn't realize he was that old.
Fuck's sake. Anyway, so 2013, 2012, whenever Many Gods West first was, there was a wonderful person who put on a Scathi devotional space where you could come in and you're just in that room and you were in that devotional space, and it was devoted to Scathi. Everything was the walls were decorated with images of her. There was like mood lighting, LEDs throughout. There were icicles everywhere, like figuratively speaking. There were like what do you call them? Like Christmas decoration icicles and stuff. Just the vibe of the room. Actually, I think that they had actually cranked the heat down to where you could see your breath. Or maybe I was just so in the ritual space. I don't know. Whatever they did, it was fucking amazing. And just to be in that space, in a hotel room of all places, and you're just instantly transported, and it's definitely Scotty's domain. And you're there, and she's there, and it's just this place where you're vibing in their presence. I would love for more people to have access to that. That left a very deep impression on me on the kinds of sacred places that I love to build. So like if I had unlimited resources, it would be a fully working Hoff with places for people to do devotional activities and crafts and incubation rooms where they can just vibe with whatever they're, when I say incubation room, that's what I'm thinking of. A room where they can just vibe with whatever god or ancestor or Vater that they want in that time frame that they have. Yeah, it was amazing. And I'm kicking myself because I know, I almost had their name again. God damn it. I'll figure it out later.
If it comes up while you're editing the audio or whoever's editing the audio, we could always put their name in the description. I just figured out my answer, which is I would actually edit my YouTube videos if I had unlimited time, instead of like practicing it over and over again, like a workshop presentation while I'm cleaning my house, and then doing these like single take 20-minute uploads where I only just now got a decent mic and only because I needed it for this podcast. I would maybe actually edit my videos and like get some good lighting, and like I would recruit people to actually get a good Gnostic Mass high production quality video up for people so they can see what it looks like, because we only have 2 videos of it. But yeah, I would do video editing, but I can't.
I know it now. I fucking know the name. It's Danica Swanson.
Okay.
Danica Swanson is one of the people that wrote Polytheistic Monasticism. They are amazing. Oh, this is a book you should run into then. I should link you the book.
Yeah, pop it in the Discord. I'm gonna get that for my partner if they don't listen to this, and then it's gonna be a great date night, let me tell you.
Just so y'all know, I actually they had me write the one of the blurbs for it. So just a full disclosure. Sorry, I just recall, I was looking through my email going, I know this person. Who the fuck are you?
It's okay. So Noah and Emily, unlimited time. What would be your project?
Well, okay, I can think of 2. One is sort of on topic and one is way off topic. The way off topic one is I would sit there and listen to the entirety of Frank Zappa's discography, because he made so much music that he has entire rooms of stuff at the like estate that's just unreleased. Like that's how prolific the guy was as a composer and artist.
You mean you wouldn't just listen to Peaches and Regalia on repeat for 3 days straight? I mean, so I guess if you have
I can do
unlimited
that.
time.
I mean, I'm sure if I listened to his entire discography, I'd hear live recordings of that so many times, it'd add up to that.
God, it's such a good song.
I suppose my sort of on-topic answer, if I had unlimited time, I'd probably try and learn Coptic and try and learn Egyptian hieroglyphics, because that would make reading sort of source material a lot easier, and seeing where translators and editors and compilers have made editing decisions a lot more sort of accessible, and I can sort of see where they're connecting dots or drawing lines or whatever. Sort of the joys of working with things in a second language, a third language. Yeah. What about you, Emily?
I don't know if time is my biggest hiccup. I think it is my own like working on my confidence. But I think I would like to do more rituals in the community and magic fun nights, for lack of better wording, where you get a bunch of practitioners together who know each other, who trust each other, and everybody does their different stuff and you talk about stuff. So I think it would probably just be connecting with people, and also more rituals for people to connect with the spirits. That would probably be it.
That's a really good answer. I think people don't consider how much of a time investment leading ritual and community work and organizing things and administration and being a priest is. Like that's a huge time sink.
Thank you for the question, both Maleck and Claire. I really appreciate it.
And
Well,
if you are listening
folks,
to this and want to give us a question, feel free to join our Discord server. And if you want to join the people watching this live, patreon.com/aroundgrandfatherfire. From the kindling tier up, you can join in when we do this live.
absolutely. All right, folks, does anybody have anything else that they want to talk before we let these wonderful folks get on their way?
We should plug our pluggables.
Yes, we should. You
I'll
first.
Go. Yep. You can find my stuff at steelcitywitch.com and also at the YouTube channel Steel City Witch. That's it.
Snow.
linktr.ee/SNAIWAGAZ. That is linktree.com/SNAIWAGAZ. And it will all be there. All my stuff's in weird languages. Because why not?
Good, Emily.
Very occasionally updated. My blog is streakingfate.wordpress.com.
You can find me on most social media, including Twitter and Mastodon as Sarenth. You can find me on Discord as Sarenth. I'm the only Sarenth there. You can also find me on TikTok. I am at Sarenth Odinsson. I am blogging at sarenth.wordpress.com, and you can find me at patreon.com/Sarenth Odinsson, ODINSSON. If you wish to schedule a reading or something like that, that is where you're going to find all that wonderful information. I just updated my blog with a new post exploring the heathen conception of the soul that I work with, and also a blog post exploring the magical analysis of the litany against fear from a heathen perspective. So if you want to look at any of that stuff, if you want to reach out, sarenth@gmail.com. If you have any suggestions for this show, if you have guests you want to see on, join our Discord, email us, please. You're going to find us on Spotify. You're going to find us on Podcast Addict. You're going to find wherever you get your podcasts at this point. Please leave us reviews. If you can't afford to join the Patreon right now, not a problem. Those reviews help a lot and they help push traffic for the channel. You can also find us on YouTube at Around Grandfather Fire on YouTube. So please keep your eyes peeled. We will have all of these new episodes up as soon as we can get them. And
if you can't afford Patreon or don't want to join the Patreon for whatever reason, whatever your circumstances are, the Discord is not Patreon locked.
It is not.
You can still join our Discord server, join the community, hang out, talk to people, give questions for us when we do the show without having to do that if that is a concern.
Yep. So if nobody else has anything, okay, well, thank you, wonderful people. We will see you all next time around the fire.